premiere of the Django and 12 Years a Slave. People are like, oh my god, aren't you so excited that movies are being made about black people? And I'm like, yeah, but no one else could play those parts but black people.
I don't know, man. They tried really, really hard.
I mean, yeah. But it's like, we're so grateful for the roles, but we're, yeah, I know. Right.
Brad Pitt's available.
The
thing about Hollywood that in a way imitates life is we're told what we can't have, and then we're told we have to deal with it, and then we're told we shouldn't be upset.
Right.
It's like, you know, it's just like what you said, Tessa. It's like I can't wake up and say, man, I can't wait to audition for Spider-Man. I just can't. I've been told, and I've come to grips with the fact that that's not a reality today. You know, fantasy, The Hobbit. Seriously, you know, I think about these things. I think about these things all the time. Like,
there's no black people in the future, man. Fantasy world, another planet. Hey, John Boyega is You can be a Klingon.
Oh! If you look very close, I can stand up. If you look very closely to the Lord of the Rings and all the ghouls, they're very clearly African American people. Did you ever look?
No, the orcs are definitely.
That's a brother. You know, but seriously, I cannot. It's to wake up and say, man, Superman, Batman. You know, and to know that you're not, and to know that and the arguments go, well, you know, they're obviously pink people. And it's like, well, no, seriously, but aren't they pink? Pink? I mean, let's keep it real.
The Superman thing always bothered me. He's faster than a speeding bullet, leaves tall buildings in a single bound. and he, like, lives two identity. Superman was passive.
I want to write and produce stories about people who happen to be black, which is different than making stories about black people and about the black experience. Because the thing about it is people like want to strip away our humanity. They want to strip away our human condition. We have everything white people have in the human condition, plus being black, plus being oppressed, which makes it even more interesting. I can make a whole movie and never mention the fact that I'm black, but I'm still black. I'm still going to approach every character from the perspective of a black person because that's the humanity I know. And that's all I can approach a character with. So I don't have to talk about it. You see I'm black. I'm aware. You know, I see the world that way the world sees me that way. Now let's talk, what else can we talk about? How can we talk about how I fall in love, how I deal with heartbreak, how I deal with everything else that has to do with the human condition? And once we start making movies about that, then I'll get really excited. But don't, you know, give me a couple slave movies and be like, now you should be jumping up and down because now we're talking about what actually happened in this country. I'm like, we should already be talking about it. Why are you even afraid to talk about that? That's why we're where we are.
I think it's important that we recognize that the success of Straight Outta Compton doesn't mean that the next day the studios are asking for black content, because they're not. They're saying, well, the Tupac movie, who else? Give me more music, rap, movie. That is just how the machine works. If you show it makes money, they'll support that thing. So I think that it's really important that as artists, as filmmakers, we don't allow ourselves to be blinded by the lights. You know, they say, oh, 60 million, 100 million. I applaud the success of Straight Outta Compton on so many levels. But I also recognize that there has to be a diversity of our story. We are human, and we're more than rappers. We're more than a lot of the things that we see ourselves on television when we turn it on.
Endlessly interesting. The thing that frustrates me, though, is not just representation, inclusion, as it is in Hollywood, but what it does, the lack thereof, what it does to cut off our own imagination. That's the thing that I think about. I remember when we were making Selma, we were hanging out on some rooftop and drinking as the cast like you do sometimes. And we ended up in a conversation about the kind of parts that everyone wanted to play. And we literally went around the room and people were talking about what they wanted to play. But in every case, it was who they wanted to play. And they were all historical figures, which is monumentally important. I don't want to discount the ways in which it is, right? The thing that it alerted to me was, what about the new iconic characters in film, the fictional characters that no one has played? Like, who wants to be the next character that feels like Annie Hall? Or who wants to be Harold or Maude? What about that? And so I think the thing that becomes troubling when you talk about, in the context of Hollywood, that you have to have a comp for something like, oh, that movie did well, so let's make another of that. I think within this community, so often playing the characters that are tried and true, that we understand, the archetypes that we know, people go, yeah, let's get so-and-so to play that character. And I'm just interested in the other conversations about the characters that we imagine. And that's the thing that worries me, the thing that frustrates me, because if I want to go into someone at a studio and say, I want to play a character like Annie Hall, no one like me has ever played a character like that.
When we went in to figure out how could we possibly piece it together independently, you know, they straight up said, well, listen, 90% of the financiers are not available to you. They just won't look at the project, period. And there's nothing
90%?
It was shockingly high, to the point where it was like, we shouldn't even go to any traditional channels at all. Because, like, these people, just because your cast is predominantly black, and none of them is Will Smith or Denzel, like, it's
absolutely right.
We're not going to be able to convince them, no matter how well 12 years and The Help, it's not going to happen. And that's fear, you know? And I think for people of color that want to see themselves in the culture and story, that's why storytelling is so important to me, because our culture is made out of these stories, and that these stories tell us who we are. You really have to sort of be willing to put yourself in the culture. I mean, there's no other way, because that's the only way to overcome that fear. We got told no international so many times. We killed internationally, dear white people did. We slayed in Paris, okay? Who would have thought, you know? But you kind of just have to, like, hear the no and keep going. I mean, dear white people haven't, because we put a $2,000 tax refund funded trailer on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have the money to make the movie, we made a trailer. And that's how we got it done. It's like,
in sort of secondary casting, where you're casting a doctor for a scene or a lawyer for a scene, the default in most of those cases, if they were sort of upper middle class or white collar employment, that was that the character needed to be white. And that unfortunate reality, I think, is because if you are an upper middle class Hollywood executive who's making a decision about who the doctor or who the lawyer is, that's who you're interacting with. Your interaction with communities of color is limited to people in your employ. And so that is the only way that you can imagine them. You can't imagine Spider-Man as black, because you can't imagine a teenager who's sort of nerdy and wants to be Spider-Man as black, because you don't know any kids like that. And I think that the more people of color, the more people with diverse communities of friends and sort of social fabric rise within the studio system, I think you're going to see increased diversity sort of top to bottom. Yeah. You're going to see the white busboy and the black chef at a restaurant instead of the reverse, which is how you normally see it. I mean, one great example, and I don't want to put him on blast here, but my friend Tendo Nagunda, who's an SVP at Disney, was the executive on Cinderella. Now, yes, the leads in Cinderella are white, but if you watch that movie, you'll notice that in the background, everyone's of color. And the reason why is, and he went to the studio and they had the conversation, he's like, look, if we're going to be in a world where a pumpkin can turn into a carriage, we can be in a world where that's also diverse. Like, it's not difficult to imagine. And so the prince's sort of first in command and really the sort of hero of the story is black. And I think that that requires somebody who brings to the process of making art a lens that is not a narrow, and again, I keep emphasizing upper middle class because I think that is a bias within the industry too, an upper middle class, you can go even further, straight white male perspective, that is the dominant lens upon which most art in the Hollywood community is made from. And the more that changes, frankly, the better content you're going to get, and the more interesting content you're going to get. I mean, for me, it's as much, my thing on diversity is as much driven by the moral and ethical imperative as it is by a sort of capitalistic one to make more money, and the selfish one as a consumer of art that I want to see better, excuse my language, shit. And so that's part of why I push for it, is I want more good stuff to watch when I'm at home on my couch watching, you know, Apple TV.